Good morning, guys. Today we are going to discuss keys. Okay, keys in Dbms. So, why should we go for keys? What is meant by key? Key means we use keys in order to find a record uniquely. Okay, it is used to uniquely identify a record or row of data from the table. Here, student is a one table and person is another table. Here in student we have attributes like id, name, address and course. In person we have name, date of birth, passport number, license number, social security number. These are the attributes of a person table and these are the attributes of a student table. So in this table we what is unique thing to identify a particular student? This id, right? So id will be considered as a primary key in order to uniquely identify a particular student detail. Okay, so keys means it is used to uniquely identify any record or row of data from a table. So for example, in student table id is used as a key because it is unique for each student. Okay, so we have the types of keys, that is primary key, candidate key, super key and foreign key. Will be discussing about alternate keys also. Okay, so primary key, so that's what I told you before. This is the employee table, and the employee table having id, name, address, passport number, license number, ssn as their attributes. So which attribute would be suitable to find a unique to find record uniquely? Which one? That is id. Okay, so employee id will be unique for each and every employee. So this id, for example, I am having the id 123, means this 123 is applicable only to me. Okay, so if I type the employee id as 123, my whole record will be displayed there. So this 123 is dedicated only to me and not for others. So that is called as unique identity. Okay, so this entity is unique for only particular employee. So employee id will be the primary key in this table. Then the first key, it is the first key which is used to identify one and only instance of an entity uniquely. Okay, we cannot have multiple primary keys in a particular table, so that would be the primary rule for this primary key. Okay, so in the employee table id can be the primary key since it is unique to for each employee. Okay, so we have some rules for defining the primary key. What is primary key? Is a column or group of columns in a table that uniquely identify every row in a table. So it cannot be duplicate, meaning the same value cannot appear more than once. That is what I told you. 123 is a employee id for me, means no other person will be having 123 as their id. So what could be the rules for defining a primary key? Means two rows cannot have the same primary key value. That is what I told you. And the primary key field cannot be null. It should contain some value and it can never be modified. If I modify my id, means what happens? The entire thing will be collapsed. So that this is the rules for defining a primary key. Primary key value should be constant. For example, in this table you find employee id as the primary key, and if I type 11, means the 11 employee ids 11 whole record will be displayed. Okay, the next one is candidate key. Candidate key is similar to the primary key, but the only thing is that we can use a set of attributes. Okay, we can use a combination of attributes in order to uniquely identify a particular record in a table. In this employee table, id is the primary key that I told you. So what could be the other than primary key? What could be the other keys in order to uniquely identify a particular record in a table? That is passport number, license number and ssn. So these three together we can call it as a candidate key. That is primary key minus other unique keys is called as candidate key. Okay, so leaving the primary key, what are the other keys in order to uniquely identify a particular table is called as candidate key. That is what is told here is an attribute or set of attributes which can uniquely identify a tuple. Tuple or tuple, we can say it. The remaining attributes except for primary key are considered as candidate key. Okay, the primary attributes, this we are minusing it out. Okay, this we are omitting and by omitting this, what are the other keys that can uniquely identify a particular record uniquely? That is passport number, license number, and SSN. These are very unique to for a particular employee. No other employees will be having a same passport number. Okay, so this is the candidate key. Similarly, we have rules for this candidate key also. It must be unique values. It is similar to that of the primary key. Candidate key may have multiple attributes. That is what I told you, right? Passport number, license number, SSN. So these can be together. We call it as a candidate key. Then the other one is super key. Super key is nothing but we can have a combination of some attributes, that is called as super key. Okay, super key which can is a set of attributes. It is similar to that of the candidate key. Super key is a superset of a candidate key. Okay, so employee ID and name together we can call it as a super key, because employee name could be the same but employee ID cannot be the same for any of the employees. So together we can call it as a super key. Here, employee in this table, employee SSN number, social security number, and employee number can be said as a super key. This combination of these two attributes we can call it as a super key. Then what about foreign key? Foreign key means this employee table is having employee ID, name, passport number, license number, SSN, department ID as their keys. And in a department table we have department ID and department name as their attributes. So in employee table, employee ID is the primary key, and in department table department ID is termed to be a primary key. So what I'm doing is I'm taking one primary key and I am including it, I am using it my another table. Okay, the primary key of one table can be used as a attribute of another table, that will be calling it as a foreign key. Okay, department table, department ID is the primary key. I am using this department ID primary key in my employee table as foreign key. Okay, so which our attribute is a primary key of another table, that will be calling it as a foreign key. Foreign key are columns of table which we use to point to the primary key of another table, primary key of another table. So this is the primary key of department table, so I am using this primary key in my employee table. So department ID attribute would be the foreign key of my employee table. Okay, so this one is foreign key. Foreign key is to maintain data integrity and allow navigation between two different instances of an entity. Okay, so what could be the alternate key? The next one is alternate key. So what could be the alternate key? So apart from primary key, what could be the other keys we can use to uniquely identify a particular record is, that is called as alternate key. Okay, so in this table we have student ID as the primary key. What could be the other attributes in order to uniquely identify a particular record in a table? That is roll number and email ID. First name and last name we cannot choose it as a key, because one name could be the same as that of other person's name, so we cannot use this as a any of the keys. So apart from this, what can be used to uniquely identify a particular record? That is roll number and email ID. So we have chosen student ID as a primary key, so the remaining attributes are roll number and email ID. So these we are calling it as a alternate key. Okay, so alternate keys is a column or group of columns in a table that uniquely identify every row in that table. A table can have multiple choices for a primary key, but only one can be set as a primary key. All the keys which are not primary key are called as alternate key. So by seeing this definition, we can easily find out what is alternate key. All the keys which are not primary key are called as alternate key. The all the keys which are not primary key, that is student ID is a primary key. All the keys other than primary key, that is roll number and email, are uniquely are used to uniquely identify a particular record, that is roll number and email ID. We can call it as a alternate key. So in this table we have student ID as a primary key. Other than student ID, that is primary key, what are the other keys in order to uniquely identify a particular record, that is roll number and email ID, that we will be calling it as an alternate key. Together we will be calling it as a candidate key. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. Go through this. Thank you.